Bore da bawb a chroeso I Clwb Clyd. Hi everyone, welcome to today's Cozy Club. Today, I'm not in my house, I'm back in school. And it's so nice to be back and see lots of my friends. While I was back in school, I found one of my favourite stories. Such an old book, I had to sellotape it together before I could read it. It's called The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch by Rhonda and David Armitage. Would you like to hear the story? Let's start. Once there was a lighthouse keeper called Mr. Grinling. At night time he lived in a small white cottage perched high on the cliffs. In the daytime he rowed out to his lighthouse on the rocks to clean and polish the light. Mr. Grinling was a most industrious lighthouse keeper. Come rain or shine, he tended his light. Sometimes at night, Mr. Grinling lay sleeping in his warm bed. The ships would toot to tell him that his light was shining brightly and clearly out to sea. Each morning, while Mr. Grinling polished the light, Mrs. Grinling worked in the kitchen of the little white cottage on the cliffs, concocting a delicious lunch for him. Wonder what she's making. Once she had prepared the lunch, she packed it into a special basket and clipped it onto the wire that ran from the little white cottage to the lighthouse on the rocks. But one Monday, something terrible happened. Mrs. Grinling had prepared a particularly appetizing lunch. She had made a mixed seafood salad, a lighthouse sandwich, cold chicken garni, sausages and crisps, peach surprise, iced sea biscuits, drinks and assorted fruit. She put the lunch in the basket as usual and sent it down the wire. But the lunch did not arrive. It was spotted by 3 scavenging seagulls who set upon it and devoured it with great gusto. "Clear off, you varmints!" shouted Mr. Grinling, but the seagulls took not the slightest bit of notice. Oh, we can see what they're thinking and saying. "This is an excellent peach surprise, boys. She's a great cook, Fred. Scrumptious lunch, Tom." I think they're enjoying their lunch, aren't they? That evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling decided on a plan to baffle the seagulls. "Tomorrow I shall tie the napkin to the basket," said Mrs. Grinling. "Of course, my dear," said Mr. Grinling. "A sound plan." Oh dear, look what happened. Did the seagulls stop eating the lunch? Didn't stop them. "They'll have to try harder than this to stop us, Bert," the seagulls said. On Tuesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains for another plan. "They are a brazen lot, those seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "Brazen indeed," said Mr. Grinling. "What shall we do?" "Our cat does not appear to like seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "No, my dear," said Mr. Grinling. "Hamish, the cat, is an accomplished seagull chaser." "Of course," said Mrs. Grinling. "Tomorrow Hamish can guard the lunch." "A most ingenious plan," agreed Mr. Grinling. There's Hamish the cat. Hamish did not think that this plan was ingenious at all. He spat and hissed as Mrs. Grinling secured him in the basket. There, Hamish, said Mrs. Grinling consolingly. I'll have a tasty piece of herring waiting for you when you arrive home. Dear doesn't look very happy, does he, getting into that basket? Sadly, flying did not agree with Hamish. His fur stood on end when the basket swayed, his whiskers drooped when he peered down at the wet blue sea, and he felt much too sick even to notice the seagulls, let alone scare them away from the lunch. Oh dear, that plan didn't work, did it? This food gets better every day, Fred. Aren't you going to chase us? I don't think he's in the mood for chasing, is he? Oh, lack-a-day, said Mr. Grinling sadly. Meow, meow, agreed Hamish pitifully. Oh, he's not happy. On Wednesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains again for a new plan. What shall we do? Said Mr. Grinling. Mrs. Grinling looked thoughtful. Oh, I have it, she said. Just the mixture for hungry seagulls. Indeed, my dear, what do you have in mind? Wait and see, said Mrs. Grinling. Just wait and see. Ooh. Mustard sandwiches, chuckled Mr. Grinling. A truly superb plan, my dear, truly superb. I wonder if the seagulls are going to like mustard sandwiches. So, on Thursday morning, Mrs. Grinling carefully packed the mustard sandwiches and sent them off down the wire to the expectant seagulls. What do you think they did when they tasted the sandwiches? Yuck! Ugh! Ack! Well, they're not very happy, are they? On Friday, Mrs. Grinling repeated the mustard mixture. All right, boys, let's go and have lunch elsewhere. Oh, it's the same as yesterday's lunch, Fred. Do you think the plan has worked? So on Saturday, up in the little white cottage on the cliffs, a jubilant Mrs. Grinling put away the mustard pot before she prepared a scrumptious lunch for Mr. Grinling. While he waited for his lunch down in the lighthouse on the rocks, Mr. Grinling sang snatches of old sea shanties as he surveyed the coastline through his telescope. And this is what he saw. Have those seagulls found somewhere else to have lunch, I wonder? No mustard in this lot, Tom. We'll fly back here for lunch again tomorrow, boys. This is a delicious chocolate eclair, Fred. Oh, I think they found a delicious lunch somewhere else. Ah, well, such is life, mused Mr. Grinling, as he sat down to enjoy a leisurely lunch in the warm sunshine. Did you enjoy that story? The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch. The reception children have lots of tasks to do over the next 2 weeks, all based on this story. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all very soon. Bye-bye.